And yeah, good morning. It's great to be speaking to you in person because the last couple of times I did this was in the dark days of pre-recorded Zoom calls. So it's really nice to be in the flesh, looking at lots of smiling faces this morning. And this morning, we're continuing to look at the Gospel of Matthew, this eyewitness account of Jesus' life, written by one of his disciples. And we're also continuing this mini summer series of ups and downs with Jesus. And so, again, like we've heard over the previous few weeks, in the text we're looking at today, there are some real ups and there are some real downs as Jesus takes us, as he speaks to his disciples in this case. So we're in Matthew chapter 18, verses 1 to 14. So it's page 978 on our lovely, shiny black church Bibles. So page 978, and let me read it for us now. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And calling to him a child, he put him in the midst of them and said, "Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believes in me to sin, it'd be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe to the world for temptations to sin. For it is necessary that temptations come, but woe to the one by whom the temptation comes. And if your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life crippled or lame than with 2 hands or 2 feet to be thrown into the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than with 2 eyes to be thrown into the hell of fire. See that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I tell you that in heaven, their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. So it is not the will of my Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. Great. So there's a lot in that. I'm not going to go through all of it verse by verse because there is so much and we could be here for a couple of hours. And I don't fancy that, and I'm sure you don't either. But it's a really interesting little heading we've got at the top of chapter 18. Who is the greatest? Who is the greatest is a question we actually ask more than we probably think we do. I'm currently listening to a podcast series on the 55 British Prime Ministers, soon to be 56, but 55 at the moment. And the host always asks his guest at the end, where would you rank this Prime Minister in the list of 55? And indeed, the host has started to try to answer the question, who is the greatest Prime Minister we've ever had? And his kind of top 3 are those 3 on the screen: Clement Attlee, Winston Churchill, William Gladstone. But it's a question that historians have debated over, will debate over for many years. Who is the greatest Prime Minister we've had? Or in football, who is the GOAT, greatest of all time? Is it Lionel Messi? Is it Cristiano Ronaldo, Zidane, Maradona, Pelé? It's a debate that will go on for many years, I'm sure. And then, so what? No Mo Salah. Well, I was looking for John Terry up there, but he doesn't seem to be on the list. But it's also something we ask closer to home. So think about either if you're at school now or if you were at school a long time ago, who was the cleverest person in your class? Or maybe who was the best at art? We care about these kind of questions. We value people who are successful, who have done something impressive, who are recognized as being great. Well, the disciples, they're clearly just like us. They love a discussion around this topic. I was looking yesterday, actually, and I could find 4 examples in the Gospels where they're asking that kind of question. Who's the best of us? Who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Who's the greatest person in the Old Testament? Those kind of questions they asked Jesus quite a lot. And so in this one today, they're having this discussion about who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And they ask Jesus what he thinks. And he responds with an answer. And it's an answer that I'm sure they were not expecting at all. And it's an answer that is actually such good news for all of us, but especially if you're a child. This is what he says. Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And I can see Zoe sitting there thinking, yeah, mate, obviously being like children are the best. They're so much better than adults. Adults are so boring. And that is true, right? Like adults are more boring than children, but that's not what Jesus is saying here. It's verse 4, there's one key word. He says, whoever humbles themselves like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So what Jesus is saying is that it's almost a child's helplessness, their dependence, their lack of understanding. Take a really young child, like a 3-year-old, for instance. They're completely dependent on an adult to look after them. I was at New Day a couple of weeks ago with a few others from the church, and Isaac Virgo, bless him, he's completely helpless without his mum there, holding his hand, picking him up when he falls over, making sure he eats his food, drinks enough water, clears the ice cream from around his mouth. And I did think if we all just disappeared and we left him in this field on his own, he wouldn't stand a chance. He's completely helpless, completely reliant on an adult, on someone else to look after him. And so Jesus is saying here, we need to be as dependent on him as a toddler is on a parent. And when you think about that, that makes complete sense. God, he made the universe. He's truly all powerful. He knows everything about everything. He's perfect. He's just incredible. And then compare him to me, a man who's lost 3 Oyster cards in the last 18 months. A man who quit his job and 3 days later changed his mind and had to go back groveling to his bosses and say, oh no, please can I stay? They were not particularly happy. That's when I compare myself to God or compare yourself to God. In fact, don't, because you can't, because he is so great and we are so insignificant. We are one person in a population of 8 billion at one point in history on one planet in a massive universe, and he made all of that. He knows everything that is happening right now in Eritrea or in Thailand as he does here in Richmond. He is God and King over everything. And that's why Jesus says we all need to be like children, because we're helpless. We can't bring anything to him that impresses him. Do you think God's that impressed with how good at football Lionel Messi is? Not really. He's probably better at football than him. And there's a whole load of other people in the world who are also really good at football. And God created him to begin with and his body so that he could play football. And so that means it's exactly the same for us. We can't do or bring anything to him that impresses him. All we can do is sit at his feet and say, Jesus, I love you. And Jesus, help me. So when we think about ups and downs with Jesus, this is a massive up. This is incredible news. And it's really good news for 2 groups of people. Firstly, if you're a kid, this is class. God loves you. He thinks you're amazing. And all he wants from you is for you to come and spend time with him. Read the Bible, pray, ask him for help, tell him you love him. But just spend time with God. But secondly, it's great news if you're an adult, because you don't need to be like Dave or Simon. You don't need to know lots of things about God, about the Bible. In fact, you don't really need to understand much at all about God. All he wants from you is for you to come to him and spend time with him. Do read the Bible so you can know more about him. Pray to him. Ask him for help. But just tell him you love him and spend time with him in prayer, because that's all he wants from you. He doesn't expect anything more. And that is such good news. But then suddenly, about halfway through where we were reading, Jesus' tone shifts quite markedly. And he starts talking about sin, classic kind of Bible words. And sin is the Bible's word for every time we decide to not go God's way. This is a little mantra I learnt when I was probably about 7 or 8 at church growing up. Basically, when we sin, we're saying, shove off God, I'm in charge, no to you and your rules. And Jesus couldn't be clearer here. Sin is a very bad thing that has bad consequences. It's actually was my mum's birthday on Friday, and so my parents are here today because we're going for lunch afterwards to celebrate. So my dad is here, but when I decided to input this illustration, I didn't know he'd be here. I want to tell you about the time my dad was most angry with me, and I mean fuming. I was 6 years old, and we were staying in this place where we had a golf buggy to drive around, and my dad made it very clear, look, you're 6 years old, you're too young to drive a golf buggy. But I thought, nah, I know better than him. Basically said in my head, shove off God. Sorry, not shove off God, shove off Dad. I'm in charge. I know what I'm doing. No to this stupid rule about the golf buggy. So I crept out with a key. I put it in the buggy, turned it on, put my foot on the accelerator, and crashed straight into a ditch. And my dad was so angry, but rightly so, because he'd warned me not to do it. In fact, he told me very explicitly not to do it, but I ignored him and I hurt myself and the golf buggy in the process. And so, a bit like my dad in the story, God warns us throughout the Bible about sin. And in this passage we're looking at today, Jesus warns us specifically that our sin, that times when we turn our back on God and do what we want to do, leads us down a very dangerous path, a path that leads to hell. In fact, Jesus is so serious about how bad hell is that he says you'd be better off cutting off a part of your body that causes you to sin if that means you avoid hell. And so adults in particular, I just want to pause here for a second and encourage you to think about your sin. Because is there a particular habit of behavior, a particular sin in your life that you've just kind of come to accept as normal? Because if there is, please take Jesus' words seriously here. We've got to cut it out. Whatever it is that's causing you to stumble, you may have to go to quite extreme lengths, but you've got to cut it out. Earlier this summer, I moved over to a flip phone for a while because of these exact verses, because my phone was causing me to stumble in a way I'm not going to go into now, but very happy to speak to you about it later. And so I changed my phone because basically, to paraphrase the verses here, it would be better for me to enter life without a smartphone than to go down a path that leads to destruction. And so as we think about our theme of these last few weeks, ups and downs with Jesus, our sin, the problem of sin, how we live, it's a massive down because it hurts God deeply. It hurts, certainly can hurt other people. And the end consequences, they couldn't be worse. But the good news is it doesn't end there. Even in this passage we see, God, he doesn't turn his back on us. He doesn't give up on us, no matter what we've done, no matter how many times we've said to shove off God, I'm in charge, no to you and your rules. Instead, he comes looking for us. He comes after us with our arms open wide, asking us to come back to him. Back to me and my dad briefly. Now, I don't know if you've ever got lost as a young child. Well, I can tell you from personal experience that it can be quite scary. I was 4 years old and I got lost in Tesco. But it's not any old Tesco. It's the massive one by the A3 in New Malden. Now, a bloke I know who's into kind of local trivia tells me that I think it's the 3rd highest grossing supermarket in the UK and the 8th highest grossing supermarket in Europe. And when you go there, you can kind of understand why. It's got 2 stories. It's got like 80 tills. It is just massive. Even now, I find it massive, let alone when I was 3, 4 years old. And so Saturday mornings, we used to go to Tesco, do the shopping, me and Dad. And one day we were there and I wandered off. Now, again, the rules had been made very clear. Stay near the trolley, don't wander off, and everything will be fine. Just stay there. But a bit like with the golf buggy, I thought, you know what, stop this for a laugh. I'm going to go have a look at the cereals or whatever, just down the aisle. And so I wandered off, and then suddenly I looked around, and I couldn't see my dad anywhere, and there's a lot of people walking around. And I ran around a bit, hopelessly, trying to see him, and then it all got a bit too much, started crying, fully lost. Now, as I'm sure you're not that surprised to discover, I did get found again, because I'm here. I mainly got found because of a nice lady who took me to the security desk and then called out my dad's name over the tannoy to get him to come and find me. But B, and probably more importantly for this illustration, why I got found was because my dad did keep looking for me. He didn't just finish his shopping and go home and say to my mum, "Oh yeah, I've lost him. Sorry about that." And he stayed looking for me until he found me. And it might be a really simple and stupid question. Why? Well, it's obvious, because he loves me and he cares about me. And Jesus says, look, it's exactly the same with God the Father. In verse 12, he says that God is like a shepherd who goes out and looks for lost sheep. And that's a picture of God coming looking for us. When we wander off, when we say, shove off God, I'm in charge, no to you and your rules, he doesn't give up on us. He comes looking for us. But unlike looking for a child in a supermarket, which is inconvenient, a bit concerning for the parent, but not a lot more, it costs God so much to come looking for us. Because as we've sung about already today, his own son, Jesus, he died on the cross so that we don't have to. Jesus, what happens is he came to earth, he lived a life, and then he gets killed. And when he dies, he takes our sin, he takes all we do wrong, and he says, yeah, I'll be punished for that so that you don't have to. And by doing that, it means Jesus, he takes away our sin, and that opens up a way for us to return to God. Because the sin that is in our lives, how we treat God and its consequences, they've been dealt with by Jesus. And that means we're just free to sit at his feet like little children at the start of the text and just enjoy being with him and knowing him and not having to worry about all the things we've done wrong, all the things that cause us shame, guilt, that hurt other people, the stuff that we're almost disturbed about that we've done or that we've thought. That's all gone. That's gone with Jesus, and we can sit at God's feet like a little child, completely guilt-free. And there is no better news, no better up than that. The fact that God loves you so much that he was willing to give up his own son so that he can reconnect with you and know you personally. That is what being a Christian is all about. That is the gospel, and that is the best news that ever has been or there ever will be. And why does God do that? Why does he give up his only son? Because, quote verse 14, it's not the will of the Father for any of us to perish. He doesn't want us to go down that path that leads to destruction. It's the last thing he wants. And that means he is buzzing when someone returns to him and says, yeah, God, take me back. I want to know you. I want to follow you, and I want to be a part of your family. So as we come to take communion and sing another song, I've got a simple ask from all of you. Why don't you come to the Father now? Maybe for you, you've lost that sense of fully relying on God like a little child, of humbling yourself before him. Perhaps you've just lost that sense of childlike wonder at just how great he is, how amazing he is, and how much he cares for you. Or maybe you know of that particular sin in your life that needs to be cut out. Can I say there's no better time than right now to confess that sin to God? And indeed, to someone else here. The Bible does encourage us to confess our sins to one another. And so do speak to one of the elders, perhaps, or someone in your life group. And why not mark today, the 21st of August, 2022, as the day that you made tangible and significant changes so that you could cut that recurring sin, that recurring habit or issue out of your life. Or look, perhaps you're not a Christian yet. You're not trusting in and following Jesus. Well, hear this. The Father is looking for you. His arms are open wide, and he's ready for you to run into them and return to him. To come to him for forgiveness, a fresh start, and a new life with him rather than without him. So if that's you, then I'd encourage you, as when we're worshipping now in a second, just say a little prayer to God. Ask for his forgiveness. Ask for his help to follow him going forward. And just say thank you and that you love him and that you want to follow him going forward. It can be really, really simple. So yeah, just to repeat those three things really. Is it maybe kind of almost re-understanding or re-acknowledging or appreciating how amazing God is and how humble we need to be before him and helpless we are before him? Perhaps it's around cutting sin out of your life. Or maybe it is for the first time, or returning to, after a while, coming back to the Father and saying, hey, I'm sorry, thank you, and I want to follow you going forward. Let me pray for us. Father God, thank you that you are so great, so awesome, that you made everything, made the world, made me. And thank you that you care about us so much, whether we are 2 years old or 102 years old. You genuinely care about us and love us and want to know us. Sorry for my sin, I think even this morning, and for all of us for our sin that so often gets in the way, that hurts ourselves, hurts other people, most importantly hurts you. Lord God, I do pray that you, I ask for your forgiveness. Say sorry. Sorry for that sin. Help us cut out those things, that habitual behavior that we know is wrong, but we keep doing anyway. Lord, by your Spirit, help us fight that battle week in, week out. But Lord, ultimately, just want to say thank you for Jesus and for his death on the cross, his resurrection, and the fact that that means despite what we have done in the past, what we may well still even do in the future, you love us, we're forgiven, and we can know you personally and spend time with you. And so I pray, be with us now as each of us individually spends time with you, as we drink the wine and eat the bread. Lord, be encouraging us and strengthening us and help us to follow you all the more going forward. In your name, amen.